and girls, Mrs. Sadowski here with Unit 6, Week 3. And this week we're going to be looking at Hercules Quest. This is an excerpt from the Three Golden Apples, which is a much larger piece. And as I get into reading this, we'll get a little bit of background so we can understand the story better. Now, this is a Greek myth, and myths are different from folk tales and fairy tales, but yet they're very similar too. Oftentimes in the myths, there is some sort of challenge that has to be faced. You usually have somebody trying to outsmart someone else. Oftentimes there's something trying to be explained in it. So we're going to go through. Today, our purpose is to be looking at those key events and making sure you understand the story, seeing if you could summarize it. But you'll see that your assignment is going to be slightly different from the traditional key event summarize thing. So let's go ahead and take a look here. Hercules Quest, an excerpt from The Three Golden Apples by Nathaniel Hawthorne. The myths of ancient Greece and Rome are stories of powerful gods and goddesses, courageous human heroes, and monster-like creatures. All of these characters play a part in dramatic journeys and adventures. The hero in the following passage is one of the most important figures in Greek and Roman mythology. His name is Hercules, or Heracles in Greek mythology. And he is a demigod, the son of the Roman god Jupiter, or Zeus in Greek mythology, and a mortal mother. Hercules is known for his incredible strength and courage. Later, after he commits a terrible crime, he is sentenced to 12 tasks or labors to atone for his actions. That means to show that he's sorry. One of these labors is to retrieve a treasure of 3 golden apples guarded by nymphs called Hesperides and many-headed giant dragon. Hercules travels a long way and goes through many trials on his quest to get the golden apples. He also gets help from Atlas, the leader of the Titans, a race of giants. Nathaniel Hawthorne, who lived from 1804 to 1864, was an American novelist and short story writer. One of his most celebrated novels is The Scarlet Letter, and that's probably a book that you'll end up reading in high school. So here we go, all about Hercules. And some of you may have seen the animated movie about Hercules. He's very famous in mythology. So here we go. Hercules, in order to complete his quest, notice there's a quest, had to get 3 golden apples. He asked the giant Atlas about the apples and how he might get them. No one but myself can go into the garden of Hesperides and gather the golden apples. If it were not for this little business of holding up the sky, I would make 6 steps across the sea and get them for you, said Atlas. You are very kind, replied Hercules. Can't you rest the sky upon a mountain? None of them are quite high enough, said Atlas, shaking his head. You seem to be a fellow of some strength. What if you should take my burden on your shoulders while I do your errand for you? Now, Hercules was a remarkably strong man. If any mortal was capable of holding up the sky, it was Hercules. Nevertheless, it seemed so difficult an undertaking that, for the first time in his life, he hesitated. Is the sky very heavy? He inquired. Why, not particularly so at first, answered the giant, shrugging his shoulders. But it gets to be a little burdensome after 1,000 years. And how long a time, asked the hero, will it take you to get the golden apples? Didn't we have another story in which one character was pretending to hold up the sky? And here we have a character who really is holding up the sky. Oh, that will be done in a few minutes, cried Atlas. I shall take 10 or 15 miles at a stride, and be at the garden and back again before your shoulders begin to ache. Well then, answered Hercules, I will climb the mountain behind you there, and relieve you of your burden. So without more words, the sky was shifted from the shoulders of Atlas, and placed upon those of Hercules. When this was safely accomplished, the first thing that the giant did was to stretch himself. Next, he slowly lifted one of his feet out of the forest that had grown up around it, and then the other. Then, all at once, he began to caper and leap and dance for joy at his freedom. Can you imagine 1,000 years of holding the sky up and being in one place, so long that a forest grows up around your legs? No wonder he's like dancing around. When his joy had subsided, when his joy had little subsided, he stepped into the sea. Hercules watched the giant as he still went onward, until at last the gigantic shape faded entirely out of view. And now Hercules began to consider what he should do, in case Atlas should be drowned in the sea, or if he were to be stung to death by a dragon with 100 heads, which guarded the golden apples of Hesperides. If any such misfortune were to happen, how could he ever get rid of the sky? I really pity the poor giant, thought Hercules. If it wearies me so much in 10 minutes, how must it have wearied him in 1,000 years? Finally Hercules beheld the huge shape of the giant, like a cloud, on the far edge of the sea. At his nearer approach, Atlas held up his hand, in which Hercules could perceive 3 magnificent golden apples, as big as pumpkins, all hanging from one branch. So look, Atlas isn't tricking him. He got the apples. Sounds good, right? I am glad to see you again, shouted Hercules, when the giant was within hearing. So you have gotten the golden apples. Certainly, certainly, answered Atlas, and very fair apples they are. I took the finest that grew on the tree, I assure you. I heartily thank you for your trouble, and now, as I have a long way to go, and am rather in haste, as the king, my cousin, is anxious to receive the golden apples, will you be kind enough to take the sky off my shoulders again? Asked Hercules. What do you think? If you were the giant, would you want to take it back? Why, as to that, said the giant, chucking the golden apples into the air 20 miles high, or thereabouts, and catching them as they came down. As to that, my good friend, I consider you a little unreasonable. Cannot I carry the golden apples to the king, your cousin, much quicker than you could? As his majesty is in such a hurry to get them, I promise you to take my longest strides. And besides, I have no fancy for burdening myself with the sky just now. Here Hercules grew impatient, and gave a great shrug of his shoulders. It being now twilight, you might have seen 2 or 3 stars tumble out of their places. Everybody on earth looked upward in affright, thinking that the sky might be going to fall next. Seriously, he shrugged his shoulders a little bit and stars fall. But it's a myth, so they can do these kinds of things. Oh, that will never do, cried Giant Atlas with a great roar of laughter. I have not let fall so many stars within the last 5 centuries. By the time you have stood there as long as I did, you will begin to learn patience. What? Shouted Hercules, very wrathfully. Do you intend to make me bear this burden forever? We will see about that one of these days, answered the giant. At all events, you ought not to complain. If you have to bear it the next 100 years, or perhaps the next 1,000, I bore it a good while longer, in spite of the backache. Well then, after 1,000 years, if I happen to feel in the mood, we may possibly shift about again. You are certainly a very strong man, and can never have a better opportunity to prove it. Posterity will talk of you. I warrant it. Does it sound like Atlas is going to trade back? Psh, cried Hercules with another hitch of his shoulders. Just take the sky upon your head one instant, will you? I want to make a cushion of my lion's skin, for the weight to rest upon it. It really chafes me, and will cause unnecessary inconvenience in so many centuries, as I am to stand here. Hercules is asking Atlas to take the sky for just a moment so he can adjust something. That's no more than fair, and I'll do it, replied the giant, for Atlas had no unkind feelings toward Hercules, and was merely acting a little too selfish consideration of his own ease. For just 5 minutes, then, I'll take back the sky. Only for 5 minutes. I have no idea of spending another 1,000 years as I spent the last. Variety is the spice of life, I say. Ah, the thick-witted old rogue of a giant. He threw down the golden apples and received back the sky from the head and shoulders of Hercules. upon his own, where it rightly belonged, and Hercules picked up the 3 golden apples. They were as big or bigger than pumpkins, and straightway set out on his journey homeward. He moved on without paying the slightest heed to the thundering tones of the giant, who bellowed after him to come back. Another forest sprang up around the giant's feet, and grew ancient there, and again might be seen oak trees of 6 or 7 centuries old, that had waxed thus again betwixt his enormous toes. And there stands the giant to this day, or at any rate there stands a mountain as tall as he did, and which bears his name, Atlas. And when the thunder rumbles around its summit, we may imagine it to be the voice of the giant Atlas, bellowing after Hercules. Hercules completed his 12 labors successfully. He met all the challenges with courage and bravery, and as a result, his honor was restored. In Roman and Greek mythology, he is the only mortal to sit with gods on Mount Olympus. So, who tricked who? A little bit of a double trick, right? You have first Hercules asking the giant, hey, can you go get me these things? Because he needed to get them. Giant's like, yeah, and by the way, you can just stay there. Kind of tricking Hercules into staying in the sky. But then you have clever Hercules switching things up and saying, oh, just take it for a minute while I adjust something. Silly giant. Never should have taken it back. Alrighty. So, the story, it's a longer one. Took me a little bit longer to read it. And if we were to go back and pull out those key details, or those key events, I should say, you could go through and it might take a little while. I mean, after all, what's most important in such a long story? It can be hard to narrow it down. As I look at this, I think it's pretty important that we have the giant and Hercules talking. And, Hercules needs these apples, right? It's kind of important. If he didn't need the apples, he wouldn't need to bother the giant. But this part right here, where the giant says that, he could get them, and the fact that the giant says over here that we could switch, I think that's a key detail here. So the fact that, you have Hercules has to get these golden apples. This is a must. If he weren't so desperate, do you think he would ever hold the sky for this giant? I don't think he would. So he needs these. And the fact that he is going to trade. So we have right here the giant offering to make the switch. Okay? It was the giant's idea, and he was happy to do it. And, they have this conversation. It's not going to take him long. It's only going to be a few minutes, right? So they actually make the trade. So the fact that they make this trade, that's pretty key too. I mean, it has to happen in this story. We wouldn't want to forget that part. So, we go, and sure enough, Atlas goes about. Do we care that he does a happy dance? No, that doesn't matter. I mean, he could have, limped away for all we care. The fact of the matter is, he goes away. And he goes and gets it. Does it matter that Hercules is thinking about, oh, this poor giant, oh, this must have been hard? No, we don't care about that. The story could happen without it. But it is important to see that, yes, he comes back, right? So here we have the giant returning with the apples. Okay, that's important. They make the trade, the giant goes, he gets the apples. And then, what else would be key in this story? We're thinking, and I think, this whole discussion of, let's switch back, that's kind of important, right? Hercules wants to switch back. And we have this, I'm not sure what exactly I want to underline, but they have this discussion, right? It kind of goes back and forth, and basically it comes down to the giant is going to basically make him hold it. So it's kind of this whole Let's see here. After 1,000 years, if I happen to feel in the mood, we might possibly shift again. Okay? I think we could probably bring it down to that piece, right? He came back. Hey, can we switch? The giant's like, yeah, I don't think so. Let's just, hold off and I'll think about it. The next key event would be how Hercules is going to trick him, right? Because that's pretty important to this whole story. So Hercules is like, well, could you just quickly take this so I could, this little part. I just need to quick fix this part here. It's kind of a lot to underline, but it's really just one thing. It's just Hercules saying, hey man, do me a favor. And of course, the giant agrees. It's not like Hercules was going to throw it at him and say, hey, here, catch. They don't want the sky to fall, because if the sky falls, it squashes both, right? So it's an important job. So we have him saying, does it matter that he said it was only for 5 minutes? Some people might say yes, that matters. Some people might say no. I think what matters most is that he said he would do it, right? We've got to get the weight back onto Atlas. And then, of course, he actually does it, right? You receive back the sky. Okay? And what did Hercules do? Well, Hercules picked them up, right? And he set out homeward. He just was like, sweet apples, I'm out of here. He doesn't even say, bye, sorry, good luck holding up the world. I appreciate your help, but yeah, I'm not trading back. He doesn't even say anything to him. He just walks away. Does it matter that the giant is bellowing and things grow up around him? Well, I guess if they ask you what the very last thing in the story is, but really what matters is the fact that he got tricked again, right? So there we have it, our story of Hercules and his quest to get those golden apples. So now, some of you might be saying, Mrs. Dowski, you just went through. You were just underlining key events in this whole story. I have yet to do that for you, right? I have only done parts of a story. Well, that is because your assignment today is going to look very different. You see, Mr. Ford, Mrs. Jansen, and myself decided that rather than give you either one of these how they normally look, we did a little combination thing here. So your assignment is going to look more like this, okay? And some of you are probably going to be extremely happy because you don't have to type a whole lot. In fact, you don't have to type at all in order to do this assignment today. We wanted you to get some practice and focus more on these skills. And of course, you can go back to the text, reread the story, all of that good stuff. So I'm going to move my book out of the way so that way we really can focus on what this looks like. So you have a question with 2 parts based on what you've read so far. So if you think about the first half of the story, which statement is true about Hercules? Did Hercules want to trick Atlas in the first part of the story? Did he want to do anything to complete his quest? Was Hercules impatient at the start of the story? Or did he love to eat golden apples? So if you think about just the first half of the story, how was Hercules? And then over here, which sentence supports the answer to part A? You're going to choose one of these quotes from the story to support the answer you choose. Again, the top part is to focus on the first half of the story. Then as we get a little farther into the story, we are going to summarize the ending part now. So if you think from the middle of the story, so the middle of the story, we're talking about starting with paragraph 18, okay? So the second half is when Atlas has actually come back with the apples and Hercules is talking to him about, oh, you're back, thank goodness. Could you please be kind enough to take this back? Okay, that's where the second half starts. So you have a 1, 2, 3, and 4. Your job is to decide of these events listed, because all of these things happen in the story. You need to narrow it down to 4. Only 4 of them. Okay? So you're going to look through these and decide which of these is not a key event. Cross those out. Get rid of the ones that are not until you're left with 4. Then whatever happened first out of those 4 key events, you'll put the 1 by it. The second, you'll put the 2, then the 3, then the 4. Okay? So again, the top half, you're moving the circles, and it's for the first half of the story. Okay? That part where Hercules says, come, and Atlas says, I'll go. Hercules says, sure, I'll hold the sky, and Atlas goes and gets the apples, and Atlas comes back. Okay? Based on that, how would you describe Hercules, and how would you support it? The second half is, now that Atlas is back, and Hercules wants to trade, what happens from then on? And that's this bottom part. All right, boys and girls, so hopefully you understand your task. I wish you well, and I will see you in another film for what comes for the next day.